So I should also talk about myself a bit and what has happened to me because of the lockdowns and all of these mandates. So um, previously, I grew up in Windsor, and then I moved to Toronto because I wanted to pursue acting, and that was going okay. It was a very slow start, but then I finally got an agent, and things seemed to be going well for a while, and I was getting all kinds of auditions and callbacks, but nothing actually ever stuck. Um, and all of a sudden, I lost my grandma, and I had to take a pause. And then when I came back, I suddenly had zero auditions and no communication from my agent, which completely surprised me. I didn't know what happened. I tried to reach out to her. She never said anything back. But that's besides the point. I ended up falling into a deep depression, or actually, rather, I had been struggling with depression and didn't know it yet, but I finally addressed it and got counseling first, which helped a lot. Started taking vitamin D, which also helped quite a bit. Got more involved with my church, which helped a lot. And then eventually was convinced by my counselor to actually try medication. And with that combined, God, counseling, and medication, I was coming out of it. And the biggest thing that helped me the most was when God gave me a new purpose. Or perhaps it was my purpose all along, and I just, didn't realize it yet. So after 10 years, I went back to school to one of the seminaries in Toronto for my master's in divinity, and that was going great. I was starting to finally live my life. I was coming out of the depression. I was making really good friends. I was working at a downtown mission. It felt like I was finally starting to live a life, and I was heading towards some kind of a career, and I was getting really happy. And then January 2020, a friend of mine, she ran out in front of traffic. She had been struggling with depression too, and she ran out in front of traffic and attempted suicide via traffic. Now, that did not happen. The woman who was driving the car stopped and got her to the emergency room and called the police to, and she was recovering from that. But because I had been so far deep in depression myself, that really struck me to my core. And it really shook me up. And it hit too close to home for me. And then I spiraled into some pretty deep anxiety and a depression backlash, I guess. I don't really know how to describe it, but I was kind of hiding from certain people at school and just didn't want to be bothered. Everything was making me really jumpy. And then, January 24th rolls around, and we supposedly hear of the first 2 supposed cases in Canada, which were on a bus route. The hospital was on the same bus route that I took to go to work. So I stopped going extra places because we didn't know what was happening yet, and I was only traveling to church on Sundays and to work, rather than, out and about and around whenever. And, I'd still go to friends' houses and stuff, but my friends worked a lot, and I hardly saw them anyways, so that was hard. And I was just starting to recover from that and starting to get happy again from being so anxious over what my friend had almost done to herself when the lockdowns hit. I had been working at that downtown mission that night, March 12th, 2020. It was my last day of work, and somebody else on staff, she had kids and had just gotten an email from the school saying the schools were closed the next day. So I had been stressed out in the position I was in, and I was going to step sideways back to my old position. And there were 2 or 3 weeks between that last shift that Thursday night and when I would have been able to go back to work in my old position that I personally found easier, which was reception. So much easier for me to, sit at the desk and answer questions and be yelled at by random people than for me to have deadlines. Because that's just who I am. I found out that I'm also ADHD, and I switched over, while I was going to school from the antidepressant to something for my ADHD. And that's been working great for me. So, since I was going to have 2 to 3 weeks off anyway, and all of a sudden that Friday, the next day, I got an email from school saying they were switching to online classes for at least a little bit. I was like, I'm going to go home for a couple weeks. I'll have a mini vacation with my parents. Well, it's February 2022 now. I've been at my parents' house since March 18th, I think it was, 2020. Almost living on their couch. There is a bed, but I hadn't lived there in 11, maybe almost 12 years. So the house was completely taken over with my dad's electronics, and there's really no space for any of my stuff. So I still have stuff in storage in Toronto, and I only finally got my things from the dorm at my school back to my parents' house in August, after a year and a half of the stuff being in limbo in my room, where I had lived for 2 years straight. Because living in the dorm made more sense than continuing to live downtown when it would have been an hour and a half transit ride to class in the morning, and I worked later downtown than I had class in the morning. So I became essentially homeless by all of this, and then I started failing my classes almost immediately with the online learning, because for a couple of reasons. One of them because I'm ADHD, another one because my parents are both musicians, and there was noise all the time in the house. How could I get any studying or reading done? I couldn't, and there was no space for me to do it anyways. There's no privacy there. So I completely failed the next couple of classes. Then I audited a class or two, which was a little less stressful and was kind of nice. And then after November 2020, I just stopped. And now I have OSAP coming after me, taking money out of my account every month. And I haven't been working. I haven't worked since March 12th, 2020. So that's why I'm here. I want things to go back to normal so I can go back to work, so I can have a life again. So these last couple of days have been really great. And I really want to see this shit end. God bless you all. Have a good night.